Great. So with that, I think every time I moderate a panel, the best that everyone introduce themselves and what they're doing in government today. So if you could provide a quick introduction of who you are and what you're doing today as it relates to cloud PMO and or software factories in modernizing and moving to cloud. So with that, I'll start with Jyoti.
So thank you so much. Hi, everyone. So excited to be here. I am focusing on machine learning, artificial intelligence space. I'm building some of the DevOps features, machine pipeline building, and deployment of the models. Clearly, there's a big use case of digital modernization as part of it. That's what I'm.
Right. And I'm sensitive to the sounds. So if we're having sound issues, I may ask the presenters. We may switch over to the slide and not video. So we'll move. We'll figure that out as we go. So Irven, next to you, if you could introduce yourself. Oh, I think you're on mute. There you go. Yes.
Yes, my name is Irven. Technical lead for the Spatial branch, the farming program here at Mobile District. We support national efforts as far as systems, and we're starting to support cloud migrations. And our technology that we support in the cloud, artificial intelligence, learning, DevSecOps, software factory, big data, with the spatial data branch, we support visualization applications. And we have a mix of scientists and developers and a whole slew of specialists in migrating those workloads into the cloud. So.
Great. Jason.
Hey, good evening, everybody. It's Jason Payne. Pleased to be here this evening and happy to talk to everybody about cloud PMOs and software factories. I currently serve as the Chief Architect and CTO for Microsoft Federal, and I've been helping stand up the largest cloud program offices that we have within the federal government for Microsoft, bringing a lot of our commercial experiences and best practices to those, recently helping stand up the JEDI Cloud PMO across all of DoD.
Great. So I think we're having a few issues with audio, so I am going to switch off my my video. So hopefully that helps things a bit. So I'll start with Irven. So I know earlier when we spoke, we talked a lot about what you're doing in your organization as far as getting applications out to production. What are your top kind of challenges or lessons learned in doing that? I don't know, Irven, if you're on mute.
I would say the top lessons learned is migrating. As far as migrating to the cloud is, number one, replatforming, picking the right technologies as far as replatforming software, and just the on-premise mindset, migrating those into the cloud, where you're doing things more cloud smart versus the old premise way of thinking. So just educating, keeping the team educated and learning new ways of doing business, because it is a paradigm shift as far as operating in the cloud. And that's probably the biggest challenge.
So have you, so really it's about that learning process around cloud and how that's different than on-prem.
Absolutely.
And Jyoti, you mentioned you're working on DevSecOps. How are you using that in kind of that software factory approach of configuration of tools and processes and content in kind of a templated framework based approach?
So, thank you for the question. It's very interesting. The whole software factory approach is centered around DevOps, and some of the demos which were earlier shared, which basically is releasing on continuous delivery. So if from collaboration perspective, really the idea is that we should be able to use the assets and also be able to redeploy these services very fastly and quicker, so that we are more focusing on the product-based capabilities or use cases scenario. So we can prototype quickly, see if it makes sense, and then distribute it to wider across organization. So that's the approach. And cloud really helps because it provides agility, it provides managed servers, so you don't have to invest a lot of time usually either procuring the hardware or setting it up. So some of those services are already provided, and it helps us to move quickly and faster with the feature prototyping and getting the real user feedback before deciding that we have to invest more time, resources, and energy or money to further expand.
Are you finding that you're experiencing the same thing Irven's saying as far as that knowledge gap and from on-prem to cloud?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big lesson learned for us in general overall is that you have to start small. Don't try to boil the ocean and try to solve too many problems. There is always a set of applications. To create a portfolio, there are a set of applications which are on sunset path. So maybe you can hunt it for later date. But there are certain applications which need to be immediately upgraded because of compliance, because all of these government agencies have compliance, mandatory compliance, and regulatory reasons. So they make them as a priority. Customer facing with your stakeholders, have a discussion with them on an ongoing basis, and really focus from strategic and planning perspective on those prioritized either use cases or those applications which need to be migrated to the cloud. And then incrementally do it as you learn the lessons, then expand it to the next project or program.
And then Jason, as you're listening to this, and as folks are trying to modernize and move applications to cloud, how does that, so your perspective is more cloud PMOs. How do you set up a cloud PMO at the beginning to support that transition, maybe from on-prem to cloud and edge, if you will?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's probably a couple of key things to keep in mind, particularly as we, transition from on-prem PMOs to a cloud PMO. And I think Bob had a lot of great points and pillars for us to build on there. So I don't want to rehash, those three and sort of their related topics too deeply, but there's a couple of quick things I think I would highlight in the differentiation between on-prem. I think the first one would be keeping in mind that the cloud PMO, because you're building on a platform, has a bit of a larger ecosystem. And so there's quite a few more audiences to keep in mind, right? Whether they are the business consumers of the platform, the technical consumers of the platform, or partners and technology providers out there that consume the platform. So it's important to keep in mind those different aspects, those different needs, and make sure that you're delivering on some of the pillars that Bob talked about or your capabilities for those individual audiences and the success that they might need. I think the other things to keep in mind would be certainly from a cloud PMO point of view, there's capabilities you might not have thought of and wanted to bring to the forefront for cloud, particularly around cloud-specific activities like cost optimization or solution designs and pattern sharing, where you don't typically see those in a CapEx type of world. When you think about OpEx-based solutions, repeating patterns, building on knowledge, sharing that knowledge, and then how do we drive down costs where we need to, are certainly capabilities you want to build into a cloud PMO. We talked a little bit earlier as well about communities of practice. I think I would just peel a layer back on that and to say, PMO should really focus on facilitating experimentation, all of those agile tenets, the goodness around DevSecOps, but really more a a comfort level, if you will, of experimentation and failure, and looking at failures as opportunities to learn, not as actual failures of the program. And then finally, I think with those experimentation opportunities and potential failures and those learning opportunities, I think comes the opportunity to what I call sort of break the rules, if you will. There'll be existing policies and procedures or compliance regimes in place that maybe just don't make sense for cloud. And I think it's incumbent upon that PMO to raise the concerns of the stakeholders and the individuals consuming the platform to think about how we might change those to increase the agility and the effectiveness of it going forward.
So Jason, we're seeing a proliferation of software factories as agencies are really trying to tackle how to get to innovation faster. Mm-hmm. How do cloud PMOs and software factories work together?
Yeah, I think there's a natural synergy between those two, Karina. Like it's really a life cycle and a feedback loop, if you will. When I look at the diagram that Nirali had earlier, and just for your classic infinity symbol of DevOps there, I think software factories and PMOs work hand in hand in that way, and that you can have a PMO support multiple software factories, multiple platforms, multiple outcomes, but only through a feedback cycle, right? There needs to be sharing of common goals, sharing of best practices, learning, exchanging back and forth between both sides of those. Really it should be a partnership there that's established, right? The PMO and the cloud platform needs to provide capabilities that improve the software, the quality of the software being produced, the cadence of that software, and I think, very importantly as well, the security of that software. And then I think one of the other areas that is probably not foremost in people's minds as they begin their cloud journey, sometimes it's very exciting, right, to move to the cloud and transition and modernize your application. But I really think for the the long tail, if you will, software factories and PMOs can really partner on sustainment and lifecycle planning, right? How do you continue to drive down the cost of automation and minimize risk for those applications as they move into the cloud, both from a security point of view as well as a technical debt point of view, and actively taking a management approach to that and promoting practices, policies, and patterns, quite honestly, that reduce those types of concerns for the factory. So let them really focus on churning out, good results and high quality software.
I'd like to open that question also for Jyoti and Irven. Like, how are you seeing that kind of that relationship between cloud PMOs and your your software factories or your frameworks as you developing apps and putting them to production?
Sure. I think there is, like Jason mentioned, there is quite a bit of a collaboration which is needed across the enterprise now, because you are trying to move to the cloud, and there's so many set of possibilities which can happen. So really, and there are, I would like to emphasize, there is a big cross-cutting needs of especially these agencies, which is on cybersecurity and networking, right? Networks, because traditionally they have been mostly on-prem, and part of the reason also is because of the sensitivity of the data. That there has to be a lot of diligence which has to go in while you go to the cloud, and has to be worked with different teams so that those regulatory compliance, audit and security is well taken off from architecture and implementation standpoint. So there is a lot of coordination which has to happen across teams. And then there may be reuse, as I'm saying, the microservice, the reuse of the assets, which can be utilized from one versus another. And I would say that from roadmap or from future looking, the goal is, once a cloud infrastructure happens, is that then agencies are able to use their data quality, data usage, analytics, and machine learning standards. That can be enabled as well. And then that can feed into the core products. So the cloud PMO has to work very closely with lifecycle management, as well as working across and managing the expectation of the stakeholders, as well as sequencing the work or backlogging for different teams within the agency. So this has to go very, very much hand in hand.
Who's setting the standards, the cloud PMO or the software factory, or both?
It depends. It's not technically standard that they are driven by the technical competency needs. But if they are process related, then it's mostly cloud PMO side. So I would say it depends on which part of the puzzle needs.
Okay, great. Irven, can you tell us a little bit about your experience trying to modernize your applications and how you're working with your cloud PMO?
Oh yes, that's a trick question for me because our cloud PMO office is just now getting started here recently in the last couple of months. But I will say our CIO has been very supportive. CIO office, Corps of Engineers, our Chief Technology Office, all the service. They've been very supportive and forward-thinking. And we're standing up the cloud management office in the core. I'm starting to work with our software factory, and our development teams are starting to get more engaged with cloud management office per se. But is having the support of CIO and CIO G6 office, cyber team for on-premise has been very important. We've been pushing and working in the cloud since 2018. Early 2018. So we were kind of ahead of the organization, so to speak. But just having that existing support mechanism has been great.
How do you expect, Irven, that will change as it matures, or what are you hoping will happen as far as your day-to-day in modernizing?
Well, automation and migrating our applications into the cloud, and having a clear roadmap as far as DoD policy. That's something that's constantly evolving. It's going to evolve as we migrate things to the cloud and our policies, catching up to having more cloud policies versus on-premise policies.
Interesting. What would you say is, if I can ask, a policy you'd like to see kind of evolve if there was one specific?
That's a good question. I'm going to say DevOps, more of a DevOps role and permission in the organization, because DevOps is a new concept, and DevOps engineers, they were previously systematic, but now we're taking that new role and starting to figure out how to manage that individual as far as the security requirements and the certifications those individuals need to have to work in the cloud. So that would definitely be understanding the role of DevOps and automation engineers.
Jason, are you taking notes? Just kidding. Yeah, so it's interesting as we're hearing that. If you think about like that relationship between software factories and cloud PMOs, what are the hyperscale cloud providers or Microsoft? Since that's who you can speak to. What are they doing to support these cloud PMOs and software factories? I mean, we saw a little bit from Nirali and Michael's presentation that there's work around automation, but what's that partnership look like with government?
Yeah, so I think with government, it kind of takes forms in big buckets, if you will, but they're really both under the umbrella of partnership. I think the first one is really around training and education. And I think we still see broadly within government, there's just a knowledge that needs to be distributed around what's the art of the possible when it comes to cloud. I think we're a little bit past the time where people don't understand what cloud is or what the capabilities are, but now we're more into the art of the possible and how simple can we make it, right? How straightforward really can we make it? So there's quite a bit of training and education that has to occur, or that cloud hyperscale providers provide both to government directly, to partners, and to sort of the entire federal ecosystem. if we sort of step past, training and education, I think the next layer of sort of engagement or the assistance that really gets provided would be really around, I think, hands-on assistance. And good examples of that could be things like what we saw with the demonstration earlier tonight, and the open source components that are out there, best practices, patterns that exist. But really now, even more so than ever, the hyperscale cloud providers, including Azure, are providing really hands-on assistance and hands-on support. And whether those are cloud solution architects or engineers that work hand in hand with customers and sort of, code with scenarios, train the trainer, if you will, teach people how to fish, use those types of services, individual implementations of services to demonstrate how they work. And I think of higher value, oftentimes what we see is really the orchestration of multiple cloud services to really have a solution be implemented. And so I think there's this kind of continuum between train and educate on the art of the possible, really work through hands-on experimentation, hands-on implementation to build maturity and capability, both within customers and those software factories. And as they get that mastery, move on to the next round of training, education, and hands-on assistance, and building the next level of mastery as they go through the capabilities of the platform. And all that is really done in a theme of partnership, and get the most out of the platform and capabilities it provides.
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, from the Microsoft Azure product engineering team, we're seeing a lot around the evolution of DevOps to DevSecOps and automation. So, Jyoti, I'm very curious of kind of, you mentioned working, I think Irven did too, in DevOps. What we're seeing is, and I think the community at large, is that without that ATO, your application doesn't go too far. At least you can't get to production. How are you seeing in your work on DevOps, like that integration of DevSecOps and that evolution?
I mean, I think you rightly said it. It's definitely an evolution, and it's very much a learning cycle. And as we are saying, initial efforts are more about hand-holding. I think also from the agile coaching, and not only the cloud, the technical part of the training, but agile coaches and center of, you have agile teams as well. So going through those checks, especially when we go in agile feature teams, things go to production very fast. So having those kind of security checks and compliance and validation as whether at the development time or at the deployment time, built into the process, it's a very big key. But it's a I would say it's a roadmap to get there. It's still in the journey. I would say still has to be achieved. Considering,
yeah. No, and as your agency is looking at that framework, are you working with NIST or FedRAMP or others to set those standards?
Yeah, FedRAMP. Yes, FedRAMP. Yeah.
Great. And how about you, Irven? What are you seeing around DevSecOps? And interestingly enough, also who leads that, right? Irven, is it the cloud architect, your role that really does that transformation, or who leads that kind of effort around DevSecOps?
That's a really good question. We're still in the learning pattern of how do we implement that across DoD. That's a question that we have to come back to at the time. But we're starting to work with our cloud office, PMO office, and a lot of coordination is starting to happen. So yeah, I'll have to put a pin in that question. I can't answer that today.
And then, I mean, as far as training, I mean, we talked about cultural change. Are you finding those resources, or is that something the Cloud PMO will eventually offer?
Is that for me?
Yeah. Or anyone who wants to take that.
So I'll say Microsoft has been very helpful as far as providing what we call hackathon events, where we get all of our developers and engineers together to solve a simple problem, that has been the #1 driver to success as far as our migration, are those hackathon events where we say, okay, how do we do this in the cloud? And bringing those engineers on site, or we're going to Microsoft Office, figuring out those solutions to those problems has been really helpful. I would say that would be the #1. The #2 thing is, getting our staff to attend as much training as possible. Whenever free training is offered by Microsoft, we're getting our folks involved and send them the training.
Jason, thoughts on that?
I think that's I think the hackathons that Irven mentioned are a great example of kind of the hands-on assistance that I was talking about earlier, right? I think everybody learns in different ways, and classroom education, be it virtual or in person, is a great way to start. But those hands-on methods, I think we have routinely found in both commercial and government PMOs that they really advance individuals' knowledge. And I think particularly when, as Irven called out there's a particular goal in mind, right? It's an actual problem set. It's not something artificial or a construct of the hackathon, but it's a more mission-oriented aspect of an application or a system that folks really can dig into, and then they can see the progress, they can see the value. It builds confidence, it builds trust, and it builds capability.
Great. Well, I encourage those who are participating, if you have any questions, to send them in IM as we wrap up. But I think as I kind of look at what we've talked about today is really the foundation by which we can get to innovation faster. What are kind of final words of wisdom you would give agencies who are just getting started or are in the process of standing up organizations like software factories or cloud PMOs? So, Irven, how about if I give that first to you? Words of wisdom.
Start small, and I think I've seen that. Someone else said that earlier, but take smaller steps and figure out smaller problems versus trying to do everything at once, because it's a pattern. It's a big paradigm shift from thinking on premise and in the cloud.
Great. And Jyoti?
Sorry, I was making sure I wasn't. Yeah, I would say that standardization. There are silos of applications, some more older than the other, 15-year-old, 20-year-old. So as we have technology stack standardized from software factory perspective onto a cloud infrastructure, then we can build lot more innovation and experiments. And hence those experiments and innovations can be used and spread across agencies, because now you have a standardized technology stack. Otherwise, you will have a challenge that the innovation will be also in a silo. So there will be a lot of reuse of assets which can happen once the cloud modernization gets successful. And also, to build technology product development capabilities, which can generate best-in-class technical technology solutions, which can help evaluate and catalyze new solutions, and help agencies make informed regulatory decisions.
Just curious, are you using some commercial best practices as you kind of forge that path?
Yeah, I mean, in the sense, from standardization perspective, I think that is that is what we were saying, from cross collaboration. It is like center of community best practices, center of excellence, whatever you say in agile terms. So coming together and agreeing on the development or build or deployment set of best practices for different type of applications. Some can be Java based, some can be other language or stack based. So it is really a cross collaboration and agreement of the best practices at this point. But of course, from the cloud provider perspective, we do take their opinion in mind, and they also share, different sort of industry best practices.
Oh, great. And Jason, any final words of wisdom here?
Yeah, I think I would echo a lot of the same themes that Irven and Jyoti shared here. I'd say, certainly adopt a lot of those agile tenets. Be prepared to experiment, be prepared to learn, but also set some goals and some measurements, and make sure that you're managing against those measurements. Right, you should be able to read, react, and pivot to where you might need to go based on what you're seeing in the software delivery, either in the factory itself or the stand up of a PMO. I'd say don't be afraid to take a few risks. Make sure that you're learning from those risks, and then you're sharing those in a community of practice, and make sure that you do cast a broad net of that community of practice where everybody can really find a voice and be involved. And then I think the last thing I would say, and it's a little hokey or whatever, but have fun, right? We're all here because it's late into the evening and because we care about this stuff. And the minute that it stops being fun, step back and figure out what you need to change to make it be fun again. We're living in a really cool time for technology, so it should really be enjoyable.
It is a very cool time in technology, and the impact we can make is amazing.
Absolutely.
And the impact you guys made tonight, just volunteering your time, I really want to thank you on behalf of the community. I do have some questions for the people attending. Actually, this one, Jyoti, is for you. How much of the ML ops infusion are you seeing in DevSecOps automation?
It is, I would say, still not that matured, but we are trying to get there, because one of the federal requirements is also of the recreation of the test results, right? If we said that this, for any classification of any machine learning prediction outcome, we should be able to recreate that. And with those set of features and with that tuned model. So hence DevOps plays a key role. We're still in the journey, we want to get there. What the business is very clear on the outcome is that they don't want a machine learning model working in production and here, that's a handoff. They really want a clear process and clear articulation of how to compare previous 5 runs or 10 runs and see how the data either is changing or the prediction outcome is changing. So I would say it's very much work in progress.
Yeah, it's amazing. Great. Well, great. Thank you, everybody, for participating in a great discussion tonight. I think there's definitely a lot behind all, we're just scratching the surface here. So with that, thank you to our panelists. For the team, sorry about that. I just want to thank you, everyone, for participating tonight, and to let you know that we are standing up a new agenda for next month, September 30th, and this is around AI ML. So Jyoti, we may ask you back and participate, but we're going to have a great discussion there, and so please join if you can. We do videotape all of these events, and they can be found in our YouTube channel moving forward. And because we spoke a lot tonight about learning and actively learning, I just wanted to share some of the resources where you can kind of further that knowledge of getting to cloud and what where to go for other resources. Again, you can always reach out to myself, Karina, Homme, or Vishwazale for any speaker ideas or topics. And we look forward to seeing you again September 30th. Thank you so much.